No one in the ballroom dared to breathe when Vivian Clarke, the most powerful CEO in the city, suddenly stumbled and collapsed. In that moment of chaos, the only person who caught her was Henry Cole, a nameless single father working as temporary waitstaff. As everyone assumed she had passed out, Vivian suddenly gripped his hand tight and whispered something that left Henry frozen. A single sentence powerful enough to change her entire life, and his. The crystal chandeliers cast diamond patterns across the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel. 500 of the city's elite sipped champagne worth more than most people's monthly rent. Designer gowns swept past tailored tuxedos. Laughter echoed off vaulted ceilings. This was the annual Metropolitan Charity Gala, where the powerful gathered to congratulate themselves on caring about the less fortunate. At the center of it all stood Vivian Clarke. She was 42 years old, though most people guessed 35. Not because of surgery or treatments, but because she had mastered the art of appearing untouchable. Her charcoal suit was custom-tailored, her dark hair pulled into a flawless chignon. Every gesture was measured, every word carefully chosen. She was the CEO of Clarke Holdings, an investment firm that had grown from nothing to $3 billion in assets under her leadership. The business press called her the Iron Lady. Colleagues called her brilliant, but brutal. Competitors called her worse things behind closed doors. None of them knew the real story. Vivian had grown up in a cramped apartment on the south side where the heat didn't work in winter, and the refrigerator was always half empty. Her mother worked double shifts at a textile factory, hands cracked and bleeding. Her father cycled through jobs, warehouse worker, night security, delivery driver, never able to hold anything steady. She remembered being 8 years old, watching her mother count coins on the kitchen table, trying to figure out if they could afford both electricity and food that week. She remembered the shame of free lunch tickets at school, the way teachers looked at her with pity. She had worn the same pair of shoes for 3 years of high school, stuffing cardboard in the soles when they wore through. She worked 2 jobs through community college, overnight cleaning crew, and weekend retail. When she finally earned a scholarship to State University, she cried for the first time in years. Every promotion, every deal, every victory had been earned through discipline so ruthless, it bordered on cruelty. Cruelty directed mostly at herself. She taught herself to need less sleep, less food to eat, less connection, less joy, just more success. By 30, she had made senior partner. By 35, she launched Clarke Holdings. By 40, she controlled $3 billion. She never married, never had children, never allowed herself close friendships. People thought it was cold. They were wrong. It was fear. Fear that if she needed someone, she would become vulnerable. And vulnerable people got hurt. Control was everything. Control meant safety. Control meant she would never be that hungry, frightened child again. But tonight, as she delivered the keynote speech about giving back to the community, something was wrong. Her head pounded with a migraine that had been building for days. The lights seemed too bright. The voices blurred into ocean waves. Her hands trembled slightly. She gripped the podium harder to hide it. She had been working 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight. A major acquisition worth $800 million was falling apart. The board was questioning her leadership in closed-door meetings. The media was circling like sharks. She had not slept more than 4 hours in a night for 2 months. Had not had a real meal in days, just coffee and protein bars at her desk. But Vivian Clarke did not show weakness. So she smiled wider and gripped her champagne glass tighter and willed herself to remain standing. Across the ballroom, Henry Cole refilled water glasses. He was 38 years old and invisible. Not because he wanted to be, but because that was what happened when you fell from a middle-class life into the working poor. 5 years ago, he had been a mechanical engineer at a respected firm. He had owned a modest house in the suburbs. He had been married to his college sweetheart, Sarah. Then Sarah got sick. Cancer. Stage 4. 12 months of treatments that insurance barely covered. Henry quit his job to care for her and their daughter Lily, who was only 2 years old at the time. He burned through their savings. sold the house, moved into a cramped apartment in a neighborhood where sirens wailed every night. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in February, with snow falling outside the hospital window. After the funeral, Henry found himself alone with a 5-year-old daughter. No job, no savings, and a resume with a 3-year gap that made employers nervous. He took whatever work he could find. Construction, delivery driving, warehouse shifts, and nights like tonight, serving people who would never remember his face. He did not complain. He did not feel sorry for himself. He simply moved through each day with quiet determination, focused on one thing: giving Lily a stable life. She was 7 now, bright and funny and kind. She drew pictures for him every day and left them on the refrigerator. She still believed the world was good. That was all that mattered. Henry watched the woman in the charcoal suit give her speech. She spoke about opportunity and hard work and lifting others up. The words were fine, professional, but there was something hollow underneath, like an echo in an empty room. He had heard enough hollow speeches to recognize them. When Vivian finished, the crowd applauded. She smiled. And then, descending the stage stairs, she swayed. Just slightly. A wobble so subtle that most people missed it. Henry saw it. He was trained to see small things: loose bolts on machinery, hairline cracks in metal, signs of structural failure. He set down his water pitcher and moved closer. Vivian made it to the floor. She accepted congratulations from a city council member, shook hands with a philanthropist. Her smile never wavered. Then her knees buckled. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against marble. Her eyes rolled back. She fell. Henry caught her before she hit the ground. His arms moved on instinct, the same protective reflex that made him grab Lily when she stumbled on stairs. He held Vivian carefully, respectfully, one arm supporting her back and the other beneath her knees. Her head rested against his chest. The ballroom erupted into chaos. People shouting for a doctor. Security rushing forward. Camera phones appearing like fireflies. But in that moment, Henry's world narrowed to the woman in his arms. She was lighter than he expected. Fragile even. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into her face. Dark circles beneath concealer, lines of tension around her mouth. This was not a woman who had collapsed from a single night of stress. This was a woman who had been running on empty for far too long. "Someone call an ambulance," a man in a tuxedo shouted. "Give her space," another voice demanded. Henry knelt down, lowering Vivian gently so she was cradled in his lap. He loosened the collar of her suit jacket. Her pulse fluttered rapidly beneath his fingertips, too fast, too weak. Around them, the crowd pressed closer. Phones recorded everything. Whispers rippled through the room. "Is that Vivian Clarke? Oh my God," she fainted. "Someone get that waiter away from her." Henry ignored them all. He focused on keeping her airways clear, making sure she could breathe. Basic first aid from a workplace safety course he had taken years ago. That was when Vivian's eyes fluttered open. Not fully. Just barely. Her gaze was unfocused, confused. She stared up at Henry's face hovering above hers. The noise of the ballroom seemed distant, muffled. And then something extraordinary happened. Vivian's hand found his. Her fingers, cold and trembling, wrapped around his palm. She pulled him closer, as if sharing a secret too precious for the world to hear. Her lips moved. Henry leaned down, his ear near her mouth. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being strong." The words were barely audible. Cracked. Raw. ... Stripped of all the polish and control. For a moment, Henry did not move. Did not breathe. This was not what powerful people said. This was not how CEOs spoke. This was the confession of someone who had carried an impossible weight for too long and could not hold it anymore. Something in his chest twisted. He looked down at her. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears, vulnerable in a way that made his throat tighten. And Henry Cole, who had learned the hard way what it meant to be truly exhausted, who had held his dying wife's hand and felt the weight of grief that could not be shared, spoke without thinking. "Then rest," he said quietly. "Just for a moment. Rest." 2 words. Simple. Light. Honest. Fine. Vivian Clarke, who had not cried in front of another human being in over 20 years, felt tears spill down her cheeks. Not from pain. Not from embarrassment. From relief. Someone had given her permission to stop. The paramedics arrived moments later. They took Vivian from Henry's arms, strapped her to a gurney, checked her vitals. Low blood pressure. Severe dehydration. Extreme exhaustion. They recommended immediate transport to the hospital. But Vivian refused. She insisted on being taken to a private room in the hotel. Demanded privacy. Made it clear she would not be paraded out on a stretcher in front of cameras and guests. The hotel manager scrambled to accommodate. Security cleared a suite on the 20th floor. A doctor was summoned discreetly. As they wheeled her toward the service elevator, Vivian turned her head. Through the crowd of concerned faces and flashing phones, her eyes found Henry. He was standing exactly where she had left him, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the tuxedos. A manager was already berating him for overstepping his role. "Wait," Vivian said. Her voice was still weak, but it carried authority. Everyone stopped. "That man," she said, pointing at Henry. "I want him to stay." The manager blinked. "Ma'am, I wanted to stay," Vivian repeated, her voice hardening. "Make it happen." And because Vivian Clarke was still the most powerful woman in the room, even lying on a gurney with mascara-stained cheeks, they made it happen. 20 minutes later, Henry found himself sitting in an armchair in a luxury hotel suite he could never afford in 100 lifetimes. Vivian rested on a sofa, an IV drip in her arm, while a private physician checked her blood pressure. The doctor prescribed rest, fluids, and a stern lecture about burnout. Then he left. Silence filled the room. Henry did not know what to say. He had no business being here. This woman lived in a different universe, one where problems were solved with phone calls and power, not by working double shifts. But Vivian looked at him with something like recognition. "What's your name?" she asked. "Henry Cole." "You work for the catering company?" "Just tonight. I work wherever they need people." She studied him with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You have a daughter." It was not a question. Henry blinked in surprise. "How did you have crayon stains on your cuff," Vivian said, the faintest smile touching her lips. "And you smell like children's shampoo." Henry glanced down at his wrist. She was right. Lily had hugged him that morning before he left for work, pressing a drawing into his hand. "Her name is Lily," he said quietly. "She's 7, and her mother died 5 years ago." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Final. Vivian's expression softened in a way that surprised him. It was not pity. It was something deeper. Understanding, maybe. "I'm sorry," she said. "Thank you." Another silence. But this one felt different. Less awkward. More like two people standing on common ground they had not known existed. "Why did you say that?" Vivian asked suddenly. Henry looked at her. "Say what? When I was on the floor, you told me to rest. Why?" He considered the question carefully. "Because you looked like you needed permission, and sometimes we all need someone to tell us it's okay to stop carrying everything for a while." Vivian stared at him. Truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time. This quiet man with tired eyes and crayon stains. This stranger who had held her when she fell and asked for nothing in return. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "A woman who works too hard," Henry said simply. Despite everything, Vivian laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. "Most people would say I'm Vivian Clarke, CEO, worth $500 million. That too," Henry allowed. "But tonight you were just someone who needed help." Something shifted in Vivian's chest. A crack in the armor she had worn for so long. 3 days passed before Vivian contacted Henry again. She told herself it was simply to thank him properly. But when her assistant tracked down his information, She found herself staring at an address in a neighborhood she had not visited since childhood. The kind of place where laundromats had bars on the windows and corner stores sold cigarettes singly. Her driver looked uncertain when she gave him the address. "Are you sure, Miss Clarke?" "I'm sure." The apartment building was old, but clean. Someone had planted flowers in cracked plastic buckets by the entrance. The elevator was broken. Vivian climbed 3 flights in designer heels. Henry lived in Unit 306, with a crooked number 6 on the door. A child's drawing was taped beside the peephole. A stick figure family holding hands under a smiling sun. Vivian's heart beat faster than it had during any board meeting. She knocked. Henry answered, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something else. Wariness, maybe. "Ms. Clarke." "Vivian," she corrected. "Please, Vivian." He said her name carefully. "This is unexpected. I wanted to thank you. Properly. You didn't need to come all this way for that. I know." She paused. "I wanted to." A child's voice called from inside. "Daddy, who is it?" Lily appeared beside her father, all dark curls and curious brown eyes. She wore pajamas covered in cartoon animals, and held a stuffed rabbit. "This is Vivian," Henry said, his voice softening. "She's a friend from work." Lily studied Vivian with the unfiltered assessment only children can manage. "You're very pretty," she announced. "Do you want to see my drawings?" Before Vivian could respond, Lily grabbed her hand and pulled her inside. The apartment was tiny. 1 bedroom probably, with a pull-out couch in the living area. But everything was spotlessly clean and carefully organized. The walls were covered in Lily's artwork, crayon rainbows, marker flowers, finger-painted suns. Each one dated and displayed with care, as if they were masterpieces. The refrigerator was a museum, every inch covered with drawings held up by mismatched magnets. Lily's report card, all A's and B's. A photo of Henry and Lily at what looked like a free community event. Vivian, who owned a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art worth 6 figures, felt something constrict in her throat. This was a home. Her apartment was a showroom. This was where people lived. Lily showed her drawing after drawing, narrating each one with elaborate stories. This rainbow had 8 colors because she had invented a new one. This dragon had feathers because scales were too scratchy, and dragons probably wanted to be comfortable too. Henry made tea in his kitchen so small he could touch both walls. He brought out cookies from a plastic container, the kind that came from a grocery store bakery. Vivian sat on their worn sofa and listened to a 7-year-old explain why dragons should have feathers, and felt something unfamiliar settle over her. Peace. When Lily finally went to bed, after making Vivian pinky swear to visit again, Henry and Vivian sat in the quiet that followed. The apartment had thin walls. They could hear neighbors upstairs, a television next door, traffic below. But somehow it felt comfortable. Real. "You have a beautiful daughter," Vivian said. "Thank you. She's the reason I get up every morning." Henry paused. "The reason I keep going when things get hard. You gave up a lot for her." Henry shrugged. "You do what you have to do. That's what being a parent means." Vivian thought about her own parents. Her father, who had worked 3 jobs and still could not keep the lights on. Her mother, who had cried quietly in the bathroom. The fear that had colored every day of her childhood. "I grew up poor," she said suddenly. "Really poor. The kind where you learn to ignore hunger because there's nothing in the house to eat. Where you pretend you're not cold because complaining won't fix the broken heater." Henry listened without interrupting. "I swore I would never be that powerless again," Vivian continued. "So I worked. Harder than anyone. Longer than anyone. I sacrificed everything. Friends, relationships, sleep, health. And I made it. I climbed all the way to the top." She paused. "But I'm still that scared little girl. Terrified that if I stop for even a moment, I'll lose it all." "Yen. Now you're tired." The confession hung in the air. Henry did not offer platitudes. Did not tell her she was being irrational. He simply nodded. "I know that fear," he said quietly. "After Sarah died, I was terrified. Terrified I wouldn't be enough for Lily. That I'd fail her the way I felt I'd failed Sarah by not being able to save her." His voice cracked slightly. "Every day I wake up wondering if I'm doing it right. If I'm giving her enough. If I'm enough." Nah. Vivian looked at this man who had lost everything and kept going. Who worked jobs beneath his education and skill because it meant his daughter had a roof and food. Who had caught a stranger when she fell and asked for nothing in return. "You're more than enough," she said softly. Henry met her eyes. "So are you." 4 words. But they landed like an earthquake. For 2 weeks, Vivian and Henry existed in their separate worlds. She returned to 14-hour days and hostile board meetings. He returned to odd jobs and packing Lily's lunches. But something had changed. Vivian found herself distracted in meetings, thinking about crayon drawings and bedtime stories. She caught herself smiling at odd moments, remembering the way Lily had made her pinky swear. The memory of that tiny apartment, with its thin walls and loving warmth, haunted her penthouse like a ghost. She visited twice more, once bringing books for Lily, expensive illustrated editions that made the girl gasp with delight. Once just to talk, sitting on that worn sofa, while Lily drew, and Henry made dinner in his impossible kitchen. Each time, leaving felt harder. Then the press found out. A low-level photographer at the gala had captured the moment Vivian collapsed into Henry's arms. He had sat on the photo for weeks, waiting for the right moment to maximize its value. When a neighbor at Henry's building mentioned seeing a woman in expensive suits visiting regularly, the photographer started watching. Waiting. He got a shot on a Saturday afternoon. Vivian at Henry's door, her face soft in a way the public had never seen. No makeup. Hair down. Wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her armor of tailored suits. She was smiling, genuinely smiling, at something Henry had said. The photo sold to a tabloid for $15,000. The headline Monday morning read, "Ice Queen's Secret Romance. Billionaire CEO and Mystery Man." Within hours it was everywhere. Business news sites picked it up. Financial networks ran segments analyzing what this meant for Clarke Holdings. Social media exploded with speculation, gossip, and vicious commentary. The internet was unforgiving. People dug into Henry's background within hours. His employment history was published alongside sneering articles about an opportunistic man seducing a vulnerable billionaire. His address was leaked. Photos of his apartment building appeared with captions about trading up and gold-digging single dad. Vivian's professional world imploded. Clarke Holdings board called an emergency meeting. 8 men in expensive suits sat around a conference table and questioned her judgment, her competence, her fitness to lead. They did not care about her happiness. They cared about stock prices and quarterly earnings and the image of stability. "This is unacceptable, Vivian," Robert Chen, the board chairman, said. His voice was cold, measured. "Your personal life is affecting company performance. We've had 3 major clients express concerns. 2 are considering pulling their accounts. Shareholders expressed panic about the CEO's stability. How could they trust her to make billion-dollar decisions if she was making poor personal choices? Competitors smelled blood in the water, circling with predatory interest. Hostile takeover rumors started circulating. Vivian's carefully constructed image, the untouchable Iron Lady who needed nothing and no one, crumbled in 72 hours. She held her ground in the boardroom. Refused to apologize. Refused to end her relationship with Henry. But inside, she felt the foundations of her empire shaking. Worse than the professional fallout was the personal cost. Reporters camped outside Henry's building, their cameras and questions making it impossible for him to leave without harassment. They followed him to work sites. They approached Lily's school, trying to get photos of the 7-year-old daughter of the mystery man dating Vivian Clarke. The school called Henry twice in 1 week. His daughter was being bullied. Other children had heard their parents gossiping. They teased Lily about being poor, about her father being a gold digger, about living in a bad neighborhood. Lily came home crying on a Wednesday afternoon. A girl in her class had said her daddy was only pretending to like Vivian to get money. that they were using her. Henry held his daughter while she sobbed, feeling something break inside his chest. He had survived his wife's death, survived poverty, survived the slow grinding down of his dignity through years of low-wage work. But watching his daughter suffer because of something he had allowed into their lives, that was unbearable. He thought about Sarah, what she would say if she could see what he had done, if she would understand, or be disappointed that he had exposed their daughter to this chaos for a relationship that could never really work. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, exhausted from crying, Henry called Vivian. His hands shook as he dialed. His voice was steady, but filled with quiet devastation. "I can't do this," he said. "Not to Lily. She doesn't deserve this. Henry." Vivian's voice cracked on his name. "I thought I could. I thought maybe there was a way to make this work, to bridge the gap between your world and mine." He paused, each word feeling like pulling shrapnel from a wound. "But I was wrong. The gap is too wide. And my daughter is paying the price for my selfishness. It's not selfish to want connection. To want—" "She came home crying today," Henry interrupted. His voice broke. 7 years old, and she's being called names because of me. Because I let someone into our lives who brings cameras and reporters and judgment we can't escape from." Vivian felt tears streaming down her face in her empty penthouse. "I can fix this. I can make statements. I can—" "You can't fix this." Henry's words were gentle but final. "You have your world, and I have mine. I was wrong to think they could overlap. Wrong to think I could give you what you need. Wrong to expose Lily to this." "You've given me everything I actually needed," Vivian whispered. "I'm sorry." The line was silent for a long moment. "You're extraordinary, Vivian. But extraordinary people live in extraordinary worlds. And I need to protect my daughter. That has to come first. It always has to come first. I understand." And she did. That was the worst part. She understood completely. The line went dead. Vivian sat in her penthouse, staring at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glittered below, millions of lights promising power and success, and everything she had worked for. It had never felt more empty. She lasted 3 days. 3 days of board meetings where men in expensive suits questioned her competence. 3 days of watching her own company turn against her. 3 days of maintaining the mask, the control, the strength. On the 4th day, Vivian Clarke broke. Not in front of anyone. Not dramatically. She simply sat in her office after everyone had gone home and let the truth wash over her. She had spent 20 years building a fortress to protect herself from being hurt. But all she had done was build a prison. She had power, money, data, success, and she was utterly alone. Worse, she had hurt someone who had shown her genuine kindness. Someone who had held her when she fell and asked for nothing. Someone who had reminded her what it felt like to be human. Vivian looked at the framed magazine covers on her wall. Forbes, Fortune Nut, Business Insider. Her face stared back, cold and confident. Suddenly, she could not remember why those things mattered. She thought about Henry's tiny apartment with crayon rainbows on the walls. About Lily's laughter. About the moment on the ballroom floor when she had whispered her deepest fear and been given permission to rest. She thought about the choice before her: continue being the ice queen everyone expected, or become the person she actually wanted to be. The decision was terrifying. But for the first time in 20 years, Vivian chose herself over her armor. The next morning, Vivian called a press conference. Her publicist advised against it. Her lawyers warned her. The board threatened a vote of no confidence. She did it anyway. Standing before 50 cameras and 100 reporters, Vivian Clarke made the most honest speech of her career. She wore a simple black dress instead of a power suit. Her hair was down. Her face was bare of the armor she usually wore. She looked human. "I'm here to address recent speculation about my personal life," she began. "Yes, I collapsed at the Metropolitan Charity Gala. Yes, A man named Henry Cole caught me. And yes, I've come to care about him deeply. Cameras flashed. Reporters shifted forward. Vivian raised her hand for silence. The narrative you've created is wrong. Henry Cole is not an opportunist. He's a widowed father working multiple jobs to support his daughter. He is one of the most decent, kind, principled men I have ever met. He has shown me more genuine care than most people I've encountered in 20 years of business. She paused. You want to know why a powerful CEO would be interested in someone like him? Because he treats me like a human being. Not a bank account. Not a business asset. He sees me. The real me. The tired, scared, imperfect woman underneath the titles and money. Ms. Clarke, what about your responsibility to shareholders? A reporter called out. I'm implementing immediate changes at Clarke Holdings. Mandatory time-off policies. Mental health resources. Work-life balance initiatives. Because I'm done perpetuating a culture that almost killed me. Her voice hardened. And if the board decides that makes me unfit to lead, then perhaps I was leading the wrong company. That person is not me. Not anymore. The room erupted in questions. But Vivian was finished. She walked out, her head high, knowing she had just detonated her career, and not caring as much as she should have. An hour later, she stood outside Henry's apartment door. He answered, surprise and wariness on his face. Behind him, Lily sat at the table doing homework. I saw your press conference, he said quietly. His expression was guarded. Hurt, Ewan. I'm sorry, Vivian said, for bringing this chaos into your life, for not protecting Lily better, for everything. Stop. You don't have to apologize for being yourself. I hurt your daughter. The press hurt my daughter. He sighed. But you were right to end things. I can't give you the life you're used to. I work 3 jobs. I live in a cramped apartment. My daughter comes first, always. That's not fair to you. I don't want that life, Vivian interrupted. I want this one. The one with crayon rainbows and bedtime stories about dragons with feathers. The one where it's okay to be tired. Where it's okay to ask for help. Where I can just be Vivian. Henry stared at her. Hope kindling but afraid to believe. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking for a chance. To be part of something real. Her voice cracked. I would rather face all the judgment and press with you than spend another day in that empty penthouse pretending I'm happy. Behind Henry, Lily appeared. Daddy, she said seriously. I like Vivian. She's nice. And she said dragons should have feathers, which is correct. She looked up at her father. And you laugh more when she's here. You're sad when she's not. Henry looked down at his daughter, then back at Vivian. Lily had to change schools, he said quietly. The harassment got too bad. Vivian felt the words like a blow. I'm so sorry. Her new school is better, Lily piped up. And there's a girl named Sophia, who also thinks dragons should have feathers. Henry studied Vivian's face for a long moment, looking for certainty or doubt. And slowly, carefully, he smiled. It was small, not dramatic. Just genuine hope beginning to outweigh fear. Okay, he said softly. Okay. Lily squealed and launched herself at both of them. Vivian knelt down, pulling the girl into a hug. Over Lily's head, she met Henry's eyes. He reached out and took her hand. And for the first time in weeks, Vivian felt like she could breathe. Behind Henry, Lily appeared. She had been listening. Daddy, she said seriously, I like Vivian. She's nice. And she said, dragons should have feathers. Henry looked down at his daughter, then back at Vivian. And slowly, carefully, he smiled. 6 months later, Vivian Clarke stood in a mechanic's workshop that smelled of oil and metal and honest work. Henry had reopened his engineering business, designing custom parts for vintage cars. It was a modest operation, just him and 2 employees, but it was his. Built on skill and passion instead of desperation. Vivian had stepped back from daily operations at Clarke Holdings, transitioning to an advisory role. The board had fought her. Some shareholders had dumped stock. The business press had written scathing articles. She had never been happier. She spent mornings working remotely, advising on strategy and investments. Afternoons, she volunteered at Lily's school. Evenings were for family dinners in Henry's apartment, which had become their apartment, filled with more laughter than Vivian had heard in years. She learned to cook. Badly at first, but Henry was patient. Lily was encouraging. Together, they turned burned pasta and oversalted soup into inside jokes. Vivian learned to rest, to say no, to close her laptop at 6 o'clock and mean it. She learned that strength came in many forms. Now, standing in Henry's workshop, watching him explain gear ratios to an apprentice, Vivian felt a hand slip into hers. Lily looked up at her. "Are you happy?" the girl asked with the directness of children. Vivian thought about the penthouse she had sold, the board seat she had relinquished, the magazine covers she would never grace again. She thought about Saturday mornings making pancakes, about falling asleep next to someone who knew her fears and loved her anyway, about being part of a small, imperfect family that felt more real than anything she had ever built. "Yes," she said honestly, "I really am." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Vivian and Henry sat on their apartment balcony. It was not fancy, just a small concrete space overlooking an alley. But the stars were visible, and the air was cool, and they were together. Vivian leaned against Henry's shoulder. "Do you remember what I said?" she asked quietly. "That night at the gala? I remember everything about that night. I told you I was tired of being strong. You did." Vivian turned to look at him. "And you told me to rest." Henry smiled. "I remember that too." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I'm still tired sometimes," she said. "Still scared. Still learning how to not carry everything alone. I know. But I don't regret it. Any of it." Henry pulled her closer. "Good," he said softly. "Because neither do I." Vivian closed her eyes. For the first time in 20 years, she let herself be held without tension, without fear, without needing to prove anything. And in a whisper that only Henry could hear, she said the words she had once thought were forbidden. "I'm so tired. I'm so tired of being strong." But this time, the words held no desperation, no shame, only the quiet peace of someone who had finally learned that being vulnerable was not the same as being weak. That asking for help was not surrender. That love was not a distraction from strength. It was the truest strength of all. Henry pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Then rest," he murmured. "I've got you." And for the first time in her life, Vivian Clarke believed him.